Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. Thank you to Alaska Public Media, KAKM, and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health for allowing me to bring you hangar flying. And of course, thanks to the audience for tuning in. This evening, we are pleased to have on our show Erica Bennett, an accomplished pilot who happens to be the scholarship chair of the Alaska chapter of the 99s. Erica, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
The 99s have several scholarship opportunities. Can you tell us about them?
Well, we're really excited this year. The joint chapters of the Mat-Su chapter and the Alaska chapters have pooled their monies, and we're giving away more than $6,000 this year in four different scholarships for both private pilot scholarships and for advanced training.
And can you tell us about the requirements for those applicants?
Well, for the private pilot scholarships, we do require that the scholarship applicant have been soloed prior to the application. So our application deadline is March 31st this year, or March 31st, 2015. And so that might be a good incentive to get your solo endorsement so that you can be eligible for up to $1,800 for a private pilot continuing education scholarship.
That's a significant chunk of money that can go towards training.
It's a few hours.
Definitely. Because the 99s is an all-female pilots organization, do applicants have to be female?
Yes, that is one requirement. We are trying to encourage more female aviators in the state, and the continuing education is part of our mandate. We do aerospace education as well as a fair amount of other things, so that we do want just female applications.
Okay. And do pilots need to be training at a school that does flight instruction, or can they be working independently with an instructor?
Well, it could be either or, as long as we have there's an instructor and a game plan in place. We aren't going to fund somebody without a goal. So yes, they can be a part of a 141 school or through a private instructor or with their own aircraft and an instructor, whatever manner they want to do it in.
Okay. And what about somebody that maybe wants to add a helicopter rating or is learning to fly in a helicopter? Would they be included?
Oh, of course. Yeah, any aviation scholarship. Advanced training would be anything after private pilot. Could be an advanced rating or an endorsement, CFI, anything after private. And then the private pilot scholarships would be people that have soloed but haven't obtained their private pilot's license yet.
Okay. So what types of person or applications do you look for being on the scholarship committee?
Well, we are looking for motivated individuals. In other words, they have a plan. We do ask on the scholarship application what got them into aviation, what their goals are in aviation. You don't have to become a commercial pilot. You can become just a fun private pilot as well. One of the applications, one of the scholarships we're giving away this year is in honor of Ellen Paniog, a famous Native Alaskan bush pilot. She passed away a few years ago, and we want to honor her memory with a scholarship that is giving a preference to Native women. And now if we don't find a Native applicant or we don't have one, we will have the discretion of still giving the money away. But that particular scholarship has a Native preference.
I think that's a great idea. There's definitely a shortage of female Native pilots, and I know that the state of Alaska needs Native pilots. They know the areas well, and working in rural Alaska in particularly, can help them stay close to home and do a job that they love and are respected for.
Yes, I can easily see a lot of young students going to get their pilot's license, coming back and living at home and being able to work like that.
Exactly. So could a person who's already gotten a scholarship from the 99s apply and get another one?
Yes, we encourage it as long as it's an appropriate scholarship. If they have used one scholarship for private pilots training, we would probably look for them at maybe the advanced training level next time. But there's no saying that you can't apply. We encourage as many applications as possible. Like I said, we've got four different scholarships this year. So even if you apply for one private pilot scholarship, you should apply for all three, because there's a good chance that if you're eligible for one, you might actually be eligible for the other two as well.
And where would a person go to find these applications?
Well, we have it posted on the Alaska chapter website, which is ak99s.org. We do have a scholarships tab, and then you can click and download the printable application at that point. We don't have an online application, and you would have to mail it in to our post office box, which is on the application. And like I said earlier, March 31st, 2015, the application needs to be postmarked by that date so that we can get them all in and start giving some money away.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on our show, and I hope you get a lot of qualified applicants. You're giving away over $6,000 in scholarships, and it's a great opportunity.
It's exciting, and I really hope that it goes to some qualified individuals.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. If you are a female pilot working on a license, please apply for the scholarships through the 99s. And good luck to you. Until next time, fly safely and never stop learning.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. Up here on the warnings, we've got a high wind warning out for the Anchorage hillside for tonight into early tomorrow morning. Wind gusting over 75 miles per hour. Of course, that's a higher elevations, hillside, upper hillside in those locations. The Alaska Range still under the influence of a high wind warning for tonight. And into tomorrow, gusts 70 miles per hour in areas of this highlighted zone there, mostly west of the Toe Cutoff and through the passes. And that extends on down into the northern Kuskokwim Valley there in the Nikolai-McGrath area. But again, that's mostly through the passes for those higher gusts. This area out here, winter storm warning continues for snow, freezing rain, another couple inches of snow in both these areas, the lower Yukon Valley and then the mid and lower Kobuk, or the mid Yukon Valley, lower Kobuk Valley areas, and then wind advisories through this narrow area there on the north side of the Alaska Range for gusts that are lower than the 70 miles an hour, probably in the 30 to 50 mile an hour range there. High wind warning out Bristol Bay until, well, through tonight, at least this evening, and then gradually improving sometime after midnight there. And gusts 75 to 85 miles per hour possible continuing this evening. And moving on to the satellite, still strong south to north flow here, right out of the Pacific, pulling moist, mild air northward, disturbances forming along the frontal boundary and rolling on up. Have one up into the Bristol Bay, bringing the strong winds and the heavy rain like Kodiak, 3.82 inches in the last 24 hours, ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. So quite heavy rains in some areas here. Some of that spilling on up into the southwest interior, or actually along the Aleutian Range, and then lesser amounts to the north due to the downsloping conditions in some areas. Another system swinging northward. Actually, this was yesterday's satellite imagery. Had the one out here over the Bering Sea. And again, a series of these systems coming northward. And today, much the same pattern. That one boundary is elongated out here in the west, and then we have the original one here. And you can see all that moisture aimed right in at Kodiak, low pressure here. That's going to be pulling northward, and that's what's going to put the squeeze on the gradient there. and possibly bring the strong wind gusts to the higher elevations of the Anchorage area, Chugach Mountains, Turnagain Arm, and those locations. Kind of a break right through here, but a band of snow extending northeastward from the central interior up to the eastern Arctic coast, and some light snow amounts up here over the northwest, but still got the winds 40 to 60 miles an hour through this area. In fact, storm warnings out tonight for the North Gulf Coast, across the Barren Islands, right into Kamishak Bay. And also, those storm warnings were out tonight for the western Aleutians as well. And rolling this again, you can see just the moisture and other system developing farther down here to the south. But all that cloudiness and rainfall pulling right up to the northwest and ridging, holding at least for today and possibly into tonight and tomorrow here over the southeast coast, with some of these clouds now making landfall up over the northern areas, and the surface ridge now sliding off to the southeast, and so the gradient kind of swinging around a little bit there, and it looks like some rain will push in to the panhandle eventually, probably late tomorrow sometime. With today, though, the heavy rain, as I mentioned, Kodiak Island, and the strongest winds in advance of the front here in that gradient right up into the interior, coming back around from the northwest with some scattered showers farther out to the west, northerlies to northeasterlies here over the eastern Aleutians, southeast winds in this area. So 30 to 60 mile per hour gusts tonight continue, especially the higher gusts in those storm warning areas there along the North Gulf Coast. And for tonight, the frontal takes a position something like this, a wave down here. I could have put a low in that area there with the parent low back near St. Lawrence Island now. Southeast winds, snow, areas of snow, with some of that possibly blowing here on the western Arctic coast where the winds are stronger, but winds lessening up behind the front over the Chukchi Sea areas. You can see still quite windy here in those high wind warnings, supporting the warnings out for the Alaska Range and also south central Alaska here for the warning out for the higher elevations. Rain heavy at times along the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula areas. Seward could pick up another 8/10 of an inch, and Homer had 2/3 of an inch today. So very wet conditions continuing, and that beginning to edge its way ever so slowly in toward the southeast coast. May not make it this far tonight, but that high kind of holding it off to the coast, and tomorrow starting to creep eastward, but mostly look for an increase in the clouds and some chances of some type of precipitation reaching the coast during the day tomorrow, more likely in the afternoon. The main push again is up to the north from the south or to the northwest, and this just sort of spinning off and slowly approaching that area. But you can see another good trough here bringing some snow showers mostly over the Yukon Delta with another round of gusty winds, and the windiest conditions again over the western interior, lighter winds over the eastern areas there, and it looks like it's going to stay dry here over the eastern interior with most of the moisture shifting off to the north and mostly along the southern Alaska range or southern Brooks Range. North side we'll see very little. The amounts there will probably be flurries to nothing at all with increasing east winds, getting a little gusty there along the Arctic coast, especially on the west side here, till that front passes through, and some ridging ahead of the next storm, just entering the western Bering Sea with more gale force winds. And for the forecast for Wednesday, some leftover moisture here over south central Alaska, kind of a trough right through this area with higher pressure back to the west, so that could be good for some at least chances of snow over the area with the air mass cooling off enough here in the front and the main jet shifting off to the south. Warm front moisture is streaming northward, keeping a chance of rain over the southeast coast with the best chance and the heaviest amounts falling over the central and southern areas. Drier conditions up along the North Gulf Coast, just some scattered snow showers, maybe some snow showers here over the eastern Tanana Valley, White Mountains back up into the Koyukuk, and an Arctic front just south of the Arctic coast along the north slope there. Southwest breezes, snow, periods of, and some of that could be blowing snow here where the winds are stronger, blowing and drifting snow along across the north slope to the eastern Arctic coast, probably in a band something narrower than what I've got shown here as far as anything that would be measurable, but you could have flurries there from the Brooks Range all the way out to the coastline, and a break here over the eastern Bering and the southwest coast. Not looking too bad, at least dry here for the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta. Up into the interior, just some isolated snow showers here, Seward, or from St. Nome over to Gamble. And that next front weakening as it pushes eastward with rain spreading into the Adak and then Atka areas, and rain and snow showers following in behind on some gusty southwest winds. Looking at the temperatures today for the southeast coast, 22 in Skagway, otherwise upper 20s to mid to upper 30s. The warmest locations, of course, over the south. 41 there at Middleton Island, Seward with all the rain, 38 degrees. And again, 2/3 of an inch of rain falling in Homer with 40. 29 in Anchorage, but Kenai pushed up to 37. Upper 20s there at Valdez, same thing at Talkeetna. 26 Gulkana, and that's Denali there, 36 degrees. The warmer air aloft sliding in, and mid-40s down here over the Alaska Peninsula from Bristol Bay, mid-40s Kodiak Island, and pretty mild conditions all the way out to the Yukon Delta coast with, I believe that's Nenana with 31 degrees, Delta 22, and then back into the teens here over the central interior, into the Koyukuk Valley, Bettles at 16, Anatuvik 12, 7 both at Fort Yukon and Arctic Village and Barrow, but Kaktovik up to 17, 10 degrees at Point Lay. Wainwright, or that's Atasuk, 8 degrees and mid-20s here. Selkirk Valley out to Kotzebue Sound, 23 at Ambler, 31 in Nome, and upper 20s there at McGrath, and then much milder as you head downstream to 41 at Bethel, mid-30s out along the coast. For the Aleutians, mid-30s about sums it up, although Unalaska at 39 degrees and St. George 38, 40 degrees at Cape Newenham. And for the lows tonight, staying mild out in this area with that southeast flow continuing. And very mild here, Nome above freezing for the low tonight, 35 degrees. Forecast below zero, a little ways, 0 to 10 below here over the eastern interior and north slope, near zero along the Arctic coast or either side. Teens to mid-20s here for the most part. Milder though, with tending to increase the moisture content of the atmosphere, so some of these coastal locations staying in the lower 30s. For the highs tomorrow, 10 below to 10 above here, north slope areas down into the eastern interior, but where those winds work in, could see temperatures rise up to 40 degrees, otherwise 20s, definitely above freezing into the lower 40s here across the Kuskokwim Delta, back down to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, but near 40-degree temperatures pushing all the way up to the Nome area and mid to upper 30s into the northwest interior to the Noatak Valley. Then it drops back to 17 degrees there at Cape Lisburne. And the flying weather, expect IFR here all along the North Gulf Coast and most of Prince William Sound, with the lowest conditions on the west side of Prince William Sound, and marginal VFR down across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula to the Aleutians. IFR along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Marginal VFR maybe over toward Windy, with the IFR probably staying off to the southwest a little bit, but widespread IFR here, Bristol Bay, especially along the Kilbrook Mountains, back up along the coast to St. Lawrence Island with IFR on the western Arctic coast, marginal VFR over the eastern Aleutians, the Alaska Peninsula, and then some lower stuff coming in again with that next system approaching the Shimian-Attu area. Passes, VFR on the northern approach for Anatuvik, lower through the pass, marginal VFR expected. Adigan, marginal VFR on the pass south entrance, VFR to the north. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, both passes there, IFR. Rainy, occasionally IFR. Again, lowest conditions will be on eastern approaches, better on the western entrances, but still probably marginal. And for windy, marginal VFR. Chance of some IFR off to the southwest of that pass or the southern entrance be something to watch for. And for Isabel, marginal VFR, lowest conditions south side, both for Isabel and Mentasta, although optimistically I didn't put any in on the south entrance for Mentasta. May stay VFR. And for Tanita, again, lowest here, possible IFR in the eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. And for Portage, IFR an easy one there. Chilkoot and White, I think, will hold VFR through the day tomorrow and then possibly drop down sometime overnight tomorrow night. And then for the freezing levels here, again, that persistent, strong south to southeast flow pulling 2,000 to 6,000 foot levels right up into the southwest interior here and 2,000 feet up into the central interior. And that's where you get this overrunning the surface. That's the area you'd expect some mixed precipitation of the sleet or freezing rain varieties, and that's one reason those winter storm warnings are still out. For the icing tomorrow, mostly below 12,000 feet, rime, occasional moderate to, well, moderate here right along the North Gulf Coast, in across Cook Inlet to the Alaska Range. Otherwise, another swath of light to isolated moderate icing. Western Arctic coast right down, narrowing though as you come southward across Togiak Bay, and that may trail into the Alaska Peninsula. Icing free over the Bering Sea, and then more icing entering the far west. For the upper level wind flow chart, still this persistent ridge here all fall. The ridge axis right along 140 west over the eastern Pacific, keeping us, Alaska, most of Alaska, under southerly flow, and the jet arcing all the way up into the Arctic and then dropping back southeastward across Canada there with upper level low pressure over the western U.S., this poling northward and then more storminess out to the west. Looking at 9,000 feet, low pressure, symbol should be right there, but the arrows give it away. South 40 as high as 80 knots there across the Kuskokwim Valley, and then strong winds coming up to the North Gulf Coast. And I think that 90 knot was a typo. Probably call it 40, 50. And for southerlies, 20 to 30 knots along and off the southeast coast, lighter winds over the inside waters to the eastern interior areas. And 3,000 foot winds, east-northeast, 25 to 40 knots, strongest here right over Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, with southeasterlies 55 coming across the Alaska Range, southerlies 25 to 45, dropping back to 20 knots over the eastern Alaska Range to variable over the eastern interior. Lighter winds with high pressure out over the central Aleutians, picking up to 50 from the southeast there in towards Shimia. And turbulence-wise, with the gradients the tightest and the winds probably the greatest here, especially for small aircraft. A pretty good area of possible severe from Fognak Island near Kodiak all the way up into across Iliamna Lake, Barren Island, southern Cook Inlet, of course Kamishak Bay, and possibly the Seldovia Homer area with moderate chop in the turquoise area right up into the Bering Strait and along the Alaska Range there, where those high wind warnings continue, and also over the southern southeast coast, possible light to isolated moderate chop areas of. So moving on to the marine forecasts. Southeast coast, southeast 20 to 30 knots, strongest here on the north coast. Gales to maybe even storms just off to the west here tomorrow. Much lighter winds over the inside waters and more variable. And then on Wednesday, more variable, lighter and variable winds here along the north coast at about 15, southeast 15 to southwest 20 possible there on the south coast, with inside waters southerly to southwest 10 to 15. A little more gradient may give you a 20 knot wind there through the Lynn Canal. For Bristol Bay, or for Prince William Sound, east-northeast 30 knots and storms here for the North Gulf Coast. In fact, storm warnings tonight all the way into Kamishak Bay. And then these winds lessening up throughout the afternoon, coming down to gales here for the western Gulf Coast, small craft advisories for the Barrens, dropping down to small craft advisories for the Augustine Island area. Kodiak Island, winds becoming south to southwest behind the front at about 25 to 30 knots. And then for Wednesday, lighter southwest breezes now, up Cook Inlet only 10 knots, westerlies 10 to 15, Kamishak Bay, southwest 15 here for Kodiak Island, and southwest 20 right up to the North Gulf Coast. For Bristol Bay, southwest winds 20 knots, southwesterlies at about 25 there in the Alaska Peninsula, southerly gales here southwest of Kodiak, and west 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. And then on Wednesday, looks like pretty light winds dropping down 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 there for Bristol Bay, but definitely lighter winds, still kind of a southwest direction everywhere here. but on the light side, just 10 to 15 knots. For the Aleutians, southeast 40 entering the picture tomorrow afternoon, and southerlies 25. Southwesterly, small craft advisories, most areas there, probably lighter south of Unalaska. And then for Wednesday, southwest 20 to 30 knots, gales edge their way into the central Aleutians and lighter winds over the eastern Aleutians. For the Bering Sea, southwest 25 knots on the west coast there to 35 knots north of Novak Island, and the gales across the northern Bering Sea. West coming down to 20 knots for the Pribilofs, turning south 30 on Wednesday. Lighter winds here from the south along the coast, a little bit stronger out towards St. Matthew Island. Up along the Arctic coast, easterlies 25 to 30 knots with gales here on the west side. Gales dropping and becoming southeast and coming down to brisk wind advisories from the Bering Strait on up to Point Hope. And then for Wednesday, southwest brisk wind advisories, but lighter winds here, and easterlies, pretty brisk easterlies, gale force, if not brisk wind advisories, the entire stretch of the coastline. For tonight again, high wind warning out for the Anchorage hillside, continuing out for the Alaska range, gusts 70 miles an hour into the northern Kuskokwim Valley with winter storm warnings over the lower Yukon Valley areas and into the Koyukuk. And then, anyway, the storm out here over the Aleutian, or over the St. Lawrence Island areas, a lot of rain continuing to stream northward to the North Gulf Coast, staying wet Kodiak Island, and that tries to push in toward the southeast coast in some form tomorrow afternoon, and then something will probably slide on through there tomorrow night with areas of snow and gusty winds over the west and northwest, with this low hanging back towards St. Lawrence Island. A trough swinging some gusty winds and showers into the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, and there's the next storm coming into the Aleutians. Weakens as it heads eastward. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.